Well, I'm sure the lure of living off the grid is pretty strong with quite a few people, even though maybe not strong with most people, but there's definitely a significant amount of people that do want to live off the grid because, well, you're independent. You're not dependent. You're not held to the utility company or at their mercy, or if something goes wrong, hey, you're independent. It's almost like that American ruggedness, independence, frontier attitude. You want to live off the grid. So, but I do know that when people try to do this, it's not that easy, and it's a big change. Now, I'm going to make a suggestion. Why not live semi off the grid? And you could do it piecemeal. Now, I know it'd be nice to have a very strong log cabin with solar panels, and you can actually take a more expedient approach, which is to just buy an RV motorhome or an RV trailer and go that route, which is pretty simple in a lot of ways. Or you go the real rough it way and live in a tent, but I personally wouldn't even go the RV way. Now, I personally do like the log cabin way. I think that's it's a nice romantic type of picture of independence, ruggedness. You're out there in the wilderness or whatever, and you're not dependent upon modern day society. And you might have your cell phone, your internet, but besides that, hey, there's probably gonna always be some amenities. And you actually notice most people are off the grid. They make YouTube videos. So the technology's still there, but let me put it to you this way. I think, though, just taking it in a piecemeal approach is the better way to do it, because if you try to do it all at once, it's almost an impossibility. Because it's almost like quitting smoking cold turkey or something. Maybe that's the way to do it, but maybe not. But here's simple suggestions, and you don't need to use these products in your everyday life, but maybe test them out every once in a while to make sure they work. There's a lot of things like kerosene lamps. Kerosene lamp, actually, if you buy an older kerosene lamp, even the value of it will not go down because it's an antique. And if it's been an antique, it's been proven to work for umpteen years. It's reliable as all hell. Or an oil lamp or a kerosene lamp or whatever you put in it. As long as you have some, the only thing that's really wears out on them is the wicks. So it's something simple. It's one little step you can do. You can have something like this and say, well, if the lights go out, at least I can light this, and I can have a light in my house. Right? I mean, that's one thing. Now, I have a couple generators. I actually have diesel power generators. Probably people seen in my other videos. I have a gas power generator. I have a couple maintenance-free batteries and inverters also, which are pretty good. So that's not too bad. And I got like a little solar panel. I got to get some more of that. Now, one thing I've been using recently, actually, I've been putting a lot of videos on. It's actually the same thing as this one. I got. It looks exactly like this. It's exactly like mine. The Perfection kerosene / oil heater. Now, I'm using that right now, and you could say, well, do I use the electric heat also in the house? Yeah, I do use it a little bit, but not that much. I'm using this kerosene heater in the area I'm in, most of the living space where I'm mainly in. I'm using it 24 hours a day. Um, does that mean I'm off the grid? No, but does it mean I'm a little bit off the grid? Yes, but I still have the convenience of the grid. There, I could turn on I could turn on heat anytime I want, or when as needed. And once it gets up to a certain temperature, and then once you have something like this, to maintain that heat level, let's say 74, 75, it's a lot easier. It's pretty tough to bring it up from like 55 to 75, but if you to maintain it at 75, it's not that difficult usually. So, that's one thing, you want to keep some heat going. But I use this and say, it's off the grid basically. It's off the grid. It's another apparatus that's off the grid. But it's piecemeal. It's not, you can actually just get a couple solar panels. And what I would suggest is a couple solar panels and get some RV appliances. Not something where you're using an inverter, because you lose, and no matter what you do with solar, it's still pretty good. I mean, there are inefficiencies that happen in the way you set it up, but no matter how you set it up, it's better to have solar than not have solar, but you don't have to go all solar. So, like, you don't need to disconnect your electricity. To me, to have your electricity connected a month, it's like, what, $35 or something if you use none of it? it's really small fee to have that convenience. And if you don't use that much electricity, you can keep your electric bill like, I don't know, it's $70 or something or whatever. It's ridiculously low a month, right? Um, Actually, your food bill would be much higher than that if you're talking, with average people and stuff for a month. But you could take just two panels and say, because this way you don't need a permit because you're not putting them on a roof. And if you run like you got some LED lights maybe to run on the outside of the house, or you got a couple of uh, I don't know, maybe a blender or something that works off a 12 volt, some of the RV appliances. This way you don't have to put the electricity into 120 volts, make something inside the house and then, have a separate panel box and all this other garbage. You can cut down on the complexity and just do a little bit of solar. It'll save you a little money and you're still a little bit partially off the grid. Because I always look at things more practical because, when you go solar, like full solar in your house, you got to have a permit. You got to actually build it on the roof. And there's a lot of areas in the country. I'm going to actually talk a little more about this solar because there's a lot of areas in the country where it doesn't really work that well. Yeah, obviously the best places for solar is like Western Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. But the other problem there is like their lack of water. I stated that Florida is a pretty damn good place for off the grid because you got the Florida aquifer, one of the best in the world, and you still got adequate sunshine. And also during the wintertime, since it's so far south, you got the angle of the sun is not at an extreme angle like it is up north, whereby you are not catching as much sun hitting the panels. Up north, also, you got the problem with this ice and the snow covering up the panels and all that type of stuff. So, um, you know, just a, but even anywhere you get these panels, if you just get a couple good panels and you get a few batteries that maybe you can maintain, and maybe a few RV appliances that you maybe use on a daily basis. Well, right there, and some inexpensive lighting that doesn't draw much power. Right there, that puts you a little bit off the grid, and it makes you more less invulnerable, less vulnerable, more invulnerable, or less vulnerable to catastrophes that could possibly happen, with the weather or whatever the hell it is. And the other thing is too, a very simple thing you could do, and I don't think you need a permit for this type of stuff because, I know you need a permit for pools, even if it's an above ground pool. Depends on the size, if it's a little kiddie pool. But, you could set up something like this where you have a collector that is heating up your hot water. Um, you know, I'm going to tell you one thing even about these permits. I've been like, I'm not in the building industry. I wasn't in the building industry like doing construction. I was doing accounting, but I'm very familiar with a lot of different things that go on in the industry itself. I even took all the real estate courses, insurance courses, even though I'm accounting, just for general knowledge in other fields. So I'm pretty well educated on a lot of things. But I can tell you, though, one experience I had with building permits and things like that is this. I do not necessarily ask the building permit people all these questions like what I'm going to do. Like, in other words, if you need a permit and it's up there on their site that you need a permit to do this, this, and that, fine. You get it. But, say for instance something like this where you're running a little thing to help heat up your water with the sun. It's like it's an area that they don't specifically say in most cases that you need a building permit for it. But if you went ahead and asked them about it, depending on who the hell you talk to, they might say, "Yeah, we need that, we need this," and I'm like, sometimes it's. I swear to God, even though the rules are there, there's a lot of people that interpret the rules, and the rules can go all different ways. So, like, you know, not that I want to get anybody in trouble on this, but I want to say is this I found this out as common sense advice. If it states specifically you need this, if you need a building permit to do this, this, and this, get your building permit. If it does not state anything about needing a building permit, and you're wondering, well, I want to be safe, and I'll call them up, and well, you might be setting yourself up for more BS because I found that out. It's almost like you don't want to be overdoing it one way. You want to be legal, but then again, you know, It's like you don't drive down the road and ask the cop every freaking 5 minutes, uh, dude, could I roll through here at a stop sign at a half a mile an hour? Would you give me a ticket? You know what I mean, right? That kind of example. But anyway, guy probably might, Yeah, you can't do that. So, but the thing is, with the solar panel, like you don't need to get a big bunch array of it because, I was like, I was almost going to get the stuff before, but then they got rid of all the tax credits and stuff in the state, and they got rid of the tax credits, and I think they still got them in the federal government. But I also realized that the solar panels are getting more and more efficient. It's almost like, do I want to invest in a technology? It's almost like computer technology. I used to invest in it a lot several years ago when Microsoft was the big thing out there back in the 90s. Um, it's like I realized with the solar panels, if you buy something today, 4 years from now, they're going to be coming out with something that's, maybe 3 times more efficient. But it's still good to get something. And to keep it below the level where you need to get permits. So if you got one panel out there, 2 panels out there, a couple RV appliances, well, that's helping you be semi off the grid, and that helps. The other thing is, if you're in an area or if you build in an area where you can use a well and you can use a septic, right there that alleviates. Now, of course, you do need permits for those things and all that stuff. I know that. Some people remark like, and I'm talking about, yes, you are off the grid when you have a well and when you have a septic tank. I'm not implying that you don't need permits for it. I know you need permits for it. Crap, I was in the building industry for a number of years. But you are off the grid. You're not connected to the city water. You're not connected to the city storage system. The only thing you got to worry about is, is your electricity going to be on for your well, and is your well pump motor going to work, and all that type of stuff. Now, another thing is where you want to be semi off the grid, not just for like the romantic appeal, but say for instance you have a catastrophic weather problem. Now, I know if the lights get knocked down or the power gets knocked down in Florida in the summertime due to a hurricane or bad weather or just lightning, well, it could be bad if you're in a house in the domicile where the lightning happened, or if your house got demolished by a hurricane or something. That would be one problem. But say it was just the lights were knocked out. Well, if it's warm out, it's not such a big deal. Even though I have all these generators and inverters, so to me it's not a big deal at all. But say you didn't have that, it's not such a big deal because you're not going to freeze to death. In the wintertime, up north, when you have these nor'easters, I don't know why they call them nor'easters instead of northeasters, but they call them nor'easters. I don't know why they call them that exactly, why they got that. It must be like a slang term. But when they have these things, basically you got a blizzard with snow and ice, and if the power gets knocked down and you got a foot of snow on the ground with ice and all this garbage, the power company's not going to be able to turn the power on within 10 minutes or even an hour or maybe 5 hours. It might take a day and a half, maybe 2 days. I don't know. In those kind of situations, you will be very, very, very glad that you have some kind of even portable solar panels, because, say, for instance, if you got two portable solar panels, they're not going to be way up on the roof maybe. You might not have them up on the roof. You could just put them out or brush them off the snow real easy. They could be out in the yard on under the snow, but you could brush them off real easy. You can get some power in your batteries. You could have some LED lights. You can get your laptop working. You can have a kerosene heater. Maybe you can have some water stored up in your kerosene heater. You can cook off that thing. You might have a wood-burning stove that's 90% efficient, and that type of stuff. And yes, you will be connected to the utilities, but when it get knocked out for a temporary situation, being ready semi off the grid is a great thing, and it will save you some money. What's interesting though is if you really want to think about it, not that many years ago, everybody was at least semi off the grid. Back in the 20s and 30s, a lot of places did not even have electricity. A lot of homes. Would you believe that? A lot of people don't realize that. That was like not even 100 years ago. A lot of places did not have homes. One of the things I remembered, like when they're talking about some of even, the electrical healing devices that Nikola Tesla developed, talking about the violet ray was one of them. One of the reasons he developed that was because if a home had one electrical area, there was one light socket in the living room that they could plug the device into. There wasn't even like, it wasn't even wired up everywhere in the house. That was like some brand new stuff even in the 30s. That was the more advanced homes. A lot of people didn't even have plumbing in the 20s. Believe it or not. A lot of people did not even have plumbing in the 20s. So, I mean, you're talking about, the sewage system and the water system. A lot of people were actually using wells, and they were using outhouses, or they're using septics or whatever. They weren't using all these modern conveniences we got today. Anyway, so if a catastrophic event actually happened today, people are actually far more vulnerable than they were in the past. But, it's too much of a step to go from, all the modern conveniences to just rough it and being off the grid. And for most people, I would never do that, to tell you the truth. If I was to say I want to get a log cabin up in 2 acres someplace or some garbage that was fairly remote, I would make sure that I had electricity coming from the utility company. Maybe I would have solar panels, but I would definitely make sure I had electricity coming from the full solar panel, the utility company, and telephone service, wired landline, not even just cell phone service, the whole thing. I would not be playing a game because, when you really look at the efficiencies of some of the utilities that are presented, like in the cost per kilowatt hour, it is really cheap. That is why people aren't using solar, because it's not really that economical yet. It's not, even though it's gotten more efficient. But it's still something good to have as a backup, and you don't need to go the full 9 yards. So one thing I want to recommend is a lot of people can, without going into a tent, tent would be like crazy. And to me, or teepee or something like that, or an RV would be very difficult too. I mean, it's like there's no space in there, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. But maybe maybe a log cabin type home that's strong with solar panels, maybe that would be good. But then if you're connected to utilities and you have these other backup systems, well, that's, to me, is the happy medium. And basically that's kind of how I am right now. I got everything. I got cell phone service, and the best cell phone service, the best full whatever landline garbage and stuff, and all the utilities and whatever the hell it is. But then again, I don't really use all that stuff. And if there was a problem where the utilities got struck by lightning or whatever the hell it is, well, I still have ways to get backup electricity. And it's, I personally like this because it's a little bit of an independence, but you don't have to like totally rough it. But then again, if you want to start out with something simple, start out with something simple like a kerosene lamp, because kerosene lamp, even though it's, or oil lamp, whatever you want to call it, it's an antique. It's not going to lose value. It's simple. It might look nice wherever the hell you put it. It's not going to get in the way. It's small, and it does throw out a little bit of heat, even if you need some kind of heat. So, and you probably could cook over it too. Who the hell knows? Like if you really had to, if you had to warm something up, like a can of soup or something, you probably hold it over there and it'll get warm eventually. I don't know. Maybe that would be something. But start out small. Don't go the whole 9 yards. I mean, a lot of people want to go like, I'm going to go off the grid, and it's like, holy, even when these people actually do it and they plan it out, it's a major, major, major step. It's hard. So, I mean, even if you want to go fully off the grid, you ought to do it in pieces before. I would recommend doing it in pieces off before you actually do that. And then this way, you kind of know, like, well, let's see, if I shut off the electricity and I don't use any electricity now, I'm not using it. Let's see, how's the real world going here? You know what I mean? In the real world. You could test the situation first. But there is a number of things you could do. And like I said, you don't really need, you're not going to need, if you got two panels in your backyard, charging up, keeping some batteries on flow charge, and you have, a few RV appliances that are like directly, into those batteries. I mean, you're not going to need a permit for that, for crying out loud. You shouldn't. I mean, I don't know where the heck you are, but as far as I know, you don't need permits for that. Maybe the homeowners association will hate it or something, but if you're in a place like that, you ought to be getting the hell out. Stuff like this, even when you have these, the solar heaters for the water, I don't, I never seen anything where you need. Well, don't take my advice on it, but you look it up on the thing. But then if it doesn't say nothing that you need permits for, solar collectors for heating water, well, you should be okay. Just look on the website. But I know if you ask them all these too many questions, and they find bullshit. I know that too because it's like well, there's a happy medium of like how many because the rule freaks love rules. I know that. That's kind of how it is. But you want to actually have these things for other reasons though, because in a real bad emergency, like real cold emergency or something like that, you got a blizzard and the heat goes out, and because we got all this electronic heating systems now everywhere. Everything's not simple. Nobody's just shoveling coal into the furnace. Nobody's like got no manual connectors. And before they used to even have it with the natural gas furnaces, there was like I don't know, it was like a metal strip that did something that turned it off and on. It was real simple. There was no electronics. You could bypass everything real easy. Now you can't. You know. So today if the power goes out and it's cold out, you're screwed. But if you also look at it like this, if you want to, you could probably save yourself some money in a lot of respects, and it gives you an idea also how people did it before. And I think people actually survived much better in the 20s and 30s than they did today. They make it look like, oh, it was so bad back then. But today everybody's like, they whine about every little thing. They can't, just a lot of people like that today. They just, you know, the stupidest thing. And actually, I can tell you one thing. One thing that also aggravates me a little bit. I got to go on this a little longer, but if you look up north too, and I'm from up north, actually near New York City, but they always like say, "Well, what's the mayor and what's the city going to do about? Where's the sanitation department?" Instead of getting out there and fixing a problem with a shovel or something, or doing whatever the hell you got to do. A lot of people are like that. I'm more like a hands-on person. I'll say, well, those are just some yo-yos we elected. Let's fix it. So that's one of the reasons I like the idea of being semi off the grid. It's not that difficult to do. It's not like you have to be, doing without utilities. But then again, it gives you a good idea what it takes to go fully off the grid, and even if you took your semi off the grid appliances and you started not, using any electricity that you are connected to the grid at all, say you didn't do any of that. Well, the thing is, you can always use it anytime you need to. It's right there. You got your fail-safe backup system, which is the grid. So, I think sometimes people try to overreach themselves. Sometimes they overdo it. And, that leads into problems. So just keep it with a happy medium. And just go semi off the grid. Semi, keyword.